This episode features Meg, a resilient and inspiring individual who shares with us about the trying year that forced her to resign from the bustle of her demanding life and look deep inwards. She details her decision to leave civilization and live a more primal life amongst nature for a year. You will hear about the wonders and challenges she faced with the quiet lifestyle and how connecting with nature helped her find her inner peace and strength. And she shares her insights for anyone feeling overwhelmed by life on how to step away and self-reflect. Meg, I'm so excited to have you with us. Welcome to Multispective.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up this season on Two Lives. Ever since his brother was shot and killed outside a church in Chicago, Trevon Bosley has dedicated his life to abolishing gun violence.
We as a country have seen so many things change over time, whether that's slavery, whether that's the civil rights movement, and those things have changed for the better. So I know that we can change this for the better.
We'll learn how Pardis Mahdavi turns her Iranian-American hyphen into a bridge.
A hyphenated American is an American. There's a lot of us who live in this in-between. And guess what? We have the ability to zoom out and say, here are the great things we can take from all these different cultures.
And we'll meet Yvette Gentile and Rasha Pecoraro and hear how they confront their haunting family history.
Monsters live in the dark. When you bring those monsters into the light, like the scariness is taken away.
All this and so much more this season on Two Lives.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Where are you from?
Absolutely. So I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I was actually born in Oklahoma in the USA and grew up there for most of my life. Met my husband there. We went to high school together and we were best friends, ended up getting married and later in life and decided we wanted to go on a bit of an adventure, and we moved to Colorado together, and that's kind of where it began, sort of this new taste for life.
That's awesome. Would you say it's really different? What was the reason why you chose to move to Colorado? Is it really different from home?
It is. The United States, like every state essentially is more of a different country. Yeah, there's very different ways of being, very different values, thinking that is like okay and acceptable. And it's not that anything is like wrong or bad or good, it's just different. And I will say, growing up in Oklahoma, it's a more conservative environment. And and myself, my husband also, we just never really felt like we fit in there very well. It just was an environment that like wasn't very conducive to maybe like new ways of thinking and adventure and that type of thing. And we were many times labeled as being like sort of out there or crazy or misunderstood. And Colorado always really had a pull on me. It just seemed like sort of this like frontier where like anything was possible. And so we eventually later in our marriage just decided to make a change.
Yeah, that's awesome. Always helps to have someone there by your side as well to be like, all right, let's do this together and we'll figure it out as we go, right?
100%. Yeah, we totally thought we might be a little bit crazy at times because we had a really established like friendship group and we were both like performing really well in our work. All the things that they tell you to benchmark in your life, we were. And so it did kind of feel like a weird thing to just like give it up because you just want something different out of life.
I like though that you were able to sort of to an extent detach from that kind of lifestyle or way of being. I think you were able to sort of recognize that there's something that's not making me happy and I feel empowered or confident enough to be able to say, all right, I'm going to make that move. There's a lot of people who, spend their whole life in one city and happy or not, they don't see it as an option even, that there is a wider world out there where they can completely turn their life around in a sense, because they get so attached to that little community that they're in or, that lifestyle that they're in. So it's really cool.
I love that you said that so much because I don't think less of anybody. And I think a lot of our friends and family who like did the family thing and like suburb life, like I don't see people as like less or more on that scale. I more see it as like, are you living authentically? to the thing inside of you that makes you happy. And that's really different for each of us. But I love that you said that, because I do feel like it's an insanely rebellious question to ask yourself, what do you want?
Right. That's so true. It really, really is. Because, even from a really young age, the kind of line of questioning that you're asked is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then, with that simple question, you are already starting to map out your future. You're already starting to, mold out this path that you're meant to follow. It's sort of like your whole life then sort of starts working towards this one path. And so quickly you lose this sense of like, things can change. I can change, I can be different. My needs and tastes and preferences can change in the process too. So
I love that. And I also feel like that question so much in our childhood is asked in a fear-based setting of, hey, like you need to figure out what you want to be, because either way, like in our generation, like it was like, you're going to be like homeless, you're going to be without, like, no one's going to marry you, like if you don't hit these benchmarks. And I feel like we were not taught ever to ask yourself individually, what makes you happy? What gives you joy? What do you want out of this life that you're here for? It was more of, how are you standing up to the benchmarks of our society? And how are you going to feel safe and taken care of within it? It's more of a question of survival. It's not necessarily a question that we're given in context of being. And I do feel like it's like being of like, who are you?
Yeah.
It's the question in our society that's like missing, and I feel like at war even.
Yeah, definitely. So you and your husband then moved to Colorado, and how was life different for you guys there? You basically had to start from scratch in a sense, right? Meeting new people, starting, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't know anybody. We moved to a house. We were a little brave, and I commend us for this, but instead of like moving into like a regular house, like in a neighborhood, we found like a house like with like an iron stove, like up in the mountains, that like was on a dirt road and had bears and that type of thing. Cause we were just, I think, itching at that point for like to feel alive and to make the most of like what we wanted out of our life, which we really wanted some adventure. And so I'll be frank with you. We drove our truck up from Oklahoma, and the first night we got there, we could not get up the mountain because there was a snowstorm in October. And it took us 3 days to even be able to move our things in. And it resulted in us pulling a mattress up a 500-foot hill to like sleep on that for a week to be able to like have some place to be. And I totally threw up and thought, we are the dumbest people. We have given up everything. We had security, we had jobs, we had friends, we had everything. And what have we done? To be frank, that was my first thought. But by about week 2, once we like were able to move our things in and settle in, I had this feeling of feeling at home. And I had never felt that feeling before in like a place. Like it was just like wild. It was raw. It was real. It was and I finally felt understood by like a land. And that was like a really powerful experience to me as someone who's always really connected to nature, maybe above all else.
Wow. And was it like, did you always know you had like a connection to nature, or was it something that you kind of discovered there in that time when you moved in?
I always knew. I always spent a lot of time outside. It was my favorite thing I couldn't wait to get home from school, and my mom let me have like a tiny garden on the side of the yard that was kind of hidden. And I used to just sit there and just watch the plants and talk to them. And I don't know, it was like a whole calming experience for me. And I always knew I loved nature. And I always even told my friends in college, I was like, I'm going to move to Colorado someday and like live in the woods. And my mother was really concerned about me growing up. And she would always say, she sensed my lack of like involvement in society, for lack of a better term. And she would always be like, well, what are you going to do? And I'd be like, I don't like money, and I don't like the society, and I don't like the way it's set up. I think I'd just like to live in the woods.
Wow.
And she was like, that's not an option.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. There was like a piece of it that like felt like it was born from like many, many years ago.
Yeah. That's so interesting. It's like a place that you feel like the vastness of it, instead of feeling lonely or unsafe, it was like quite the opposite. It was like the fact that it was open and it was so natural and it was so within its own element helped you to feel safe and comfortable in that vastness, right?
100%. Like, to be like really transparent, like I've always like struggled with like depression through most of my life. And when we moved up to that house, after that initial like freak out of like, what have we done? I felt happiness for like the first time, like purely for like months on end. And it's always taught me that like beyond like fear, there is something, there is like a truth. And so if you feel afraid doing something, don't let it think that you're doing something wrong. Let it be a guide to perhaps transcend it, because there's probably something for you on the other side of it if you're willing to face it. And we all have different fears, but for me, on the other side of that fear, I don't know. I just experienced like a freedom being a part of like nature and living in the mountains like that like I had just never quite known.
So, was this something that you both, you and your partner, were just equally aligned on this matter? Or was it something that you had to sort of like tell him, show him, bring him into this? Like, how did that work? Like,
I love that question so much because we both were like very much focused on like the benchmarks, as I kind of talked about, of like, and nothing wrong with that, but like career, like, and we had just like bought the house and, like all the things set up for you. But we actually watched this documentary one night, and I was always like a little bit of like a pseudo kind of hippie growing up, but I had sort of put it away to be able to adapt to be successful in society, for lack of a better term. But we watched this documentary, and it was Francis Malman on Chef's Table. And it was essentially him living in the wild in Patagonia and cooking over these fires and like reading poetry. And I don't know, something inside me kind of broke, and I started crying and realized like I had lost a piece of myself in this pursuit of security and this like American dream, and it wasn't worth it. It just like hit me pretty hard, and I begged my husband, and I was like, please, like we have to experience this. Like, let's go, like let me plan a trip. And so he allowed me to plan a trip through the Southwest, and we camped throughout 3 or 4 states for a week. And long story short, there were some really sketchy nature experiences we got into, like a bobcat circling a tent one night in a snowstorm, but like, and it was very much outside of our realm, but like we were alive. And after that trip, we were just like, we have to change our entire life. And so, because we were like, I don't know, something about it struck a match, and we were both really aligned in it. I think I'm lucky for that. There was no convincing. We were both like, okay, now we do this, and we do it together.
that's amazing. So, do you think that if he was not really feeling that kind of vibe and it wasn't in his natural element, where do you think he'd be today?
I think we'd be in Oklahoma because earlier on in our marriage, I had said, do you think we could move maybe one day? And he was like, no, never. And I love, we like have a really, we're, high school best friends, sweethearts. There's a really strong bond there. And for me, the bond was more important than the dream. And so it, it was something that I just put away when he said, no, we need to be here. Our families are here. Our jobs are here. Everything's here. And I didn't really think twice about it at the time. Honestly, I was just like, okay, yeah, and let it go.
That's amazing. And I imagine this just brought you guys so much closer as well, to be like, wow, we are actually aligned on a much deeper level than I ever imagined. The fact that you were willing to like uproot your entire life, your success, your career, everything for this. And for us to both be equally into it, like, gosh, I love you so much more.
Yeah, 100%. It went from being like, we have this whole community, we have this like house, to like, it's just us up in this like house up in the mountains, and it's us or it's us. And yeah, it really did. I can that period of our life, yeah, there's only like positive notions. And I'll be honest, it surprised me though. Like I just never saw it coming. My husband's a little bit more of the type that was normally driven towards like, I want to live in like a high rise like apartment and like be really successful. And I was always like, let's like get away from society. And then like I feel like we melded for the first part of our marriage. But I think when we had moved, we had been married 9 years. And so to be honest, it was really unexpected for me. I did not see that coming and I did not convince him. And it was sort of happenstance and it was a great surprise.
Yeah. Can you walk us through that 1 year that kind of changed things for you?
Totally. We had like a couple really, I would say, some of the best years of our life in Colorado, really stable, really wonderful, and was like, oh, great. We've been through the hard part of life. This is how it is now. But 2019, I think, had something different in store. And it was that summer. We had just come back from a backpacking trip with my older brother and a really close friend of ours. And we had hiked the Continental Divide. And we had been back, I think, a week or so. And I got a call from work one day that my father had died suddenly in a car accident. And yeah, it just like honestly was one of those moments like you're just, I don't know, like time stops, like that's everything they say. Like it just undid me and you feel it in that moment. You feel something happening to you that's like taking pieces apart from you. That's like a little difficult to explain in words. And that was like really difficult. And what followed was really difficult to like go home and take care of that, be with my brothers, see their pain. And then we came back to Colorado. And that was when I realized like how difficult, like, you know, we were both working, but like work for me had become more difficult. I was definitely like in a large state of grief. And I just had a hard time doing the role. I was an accountant, so accountants don't have a lot of liberal room for humanity sometimes. And so, yeah, it just became really difficult to perform my normal functions. And shortly thereafter, I think it was 1 month later, my husband, who had never been laid off in his life, his company did a large layoff. And he was notified that he was laid off, lost his job. And we thought, okay, great, he'll just get another job. We'll figure this out. But we got a call a week later in our house that we owned in Oklahoma that had renters in it. We got a call that house was falling apart due to a fraudulent inspection. And so our renters had to move out. So we now have 2 mortgages. There was no way for us to be able to cover that, even if he got another job. So we're kind of like, what do we do? And then it wasn't more than a week later than that, we had a very bad snowstorm where we lived on the mountain and we lost one of our vehicles. And that's a whole story in and of itself. But so now we're like 1 vehicle, 2 mortgages, 1 job. And it was like, what do we do? And even if he like I said, like would have recouped another like job, we would have just been underwater. And it's one of those moments that like, I have so much compassion for people because I talk about it frequently, but in America, you're kind of just like one bad thing away from everything you've worked for going away. There's no safe hold for you here in your healthcare or your home or anything like that. You're kind of just on edge a lot. And for us, it totally collapsed. And so we ended up talking to my brother and going back, and we decided, you know what, if we can't get beyond this thing, like let's do our dream of living on the road. Let's get a little small trailer, like get a pickup truck, and let's just sell everything we own. And let's get out from under this and try to find some peace. Because even at that time, I was like, I don't know how I can keep working, just based on the grief and the point of depression I was in. And so that's what we did. We decided that we would live on the road at that point. We had a whiteboard session and some strong cocktails. And we said, what do we do? And made all the options. And we said, okay, that's the one. We sell everything and uh, we go back to stay with my younger brother and his wife, who kindly took us in for a couple of months. And we live in the wild and we owe no one anything.
Wow. It's funny because, like, you mentioned that you guys moving to Colorado at the beginning was, in a sense, a way of like getting away from it. Do you feel like you physically distanced yourself from your life back at home, but there was a part of you that was still kind of stuck somewhat in that rat race, in that there was still an attachment that it was like almost like you needed to like let go of those last few little things that was holding you back in society?
Yeah. I like, again, I love your questions. They're so poignant because I think I want to do things like the peaceful, easy way. And I feel like life is like, it's going to take you too long and we want you to get there. Yeah. Not that I think everything in life is like this sort of cosmic event, but 1,000%, because I feel like when we moved out to Colorado, I thought, okay, we're going to be good now. We get that wildlife. We're living up in the mountains, but it still takes money to do that. And that still meant both of us had jobs we weren't particularly fond of. And, and that's, 9 hours a day, most of your life. And it really bothered me. I still like really couldn't believe it. And I felt really like privileged for thinking it. And I still do sometimes, but I'm just like, I just can't believe this. Like 9 hours a day. Like I am with people I don't particularly enjoy, away from my husband, whom I love, doing work that I'm underpaid for and barely able to pay my bills. And I feel like that's a really common American experience. And there's like a lot of despair in it. And I think even when you make really good choices, our system really still catches up to you. Yeah. And it becomes like hard to feel like you're thriving, even when you do the thing that you feel like is the best situation for you to seize your life. And so, yes, I do feel like, again, like it felt like a forced hand situation of like there was no option to maintain jobs, to maintain the status quo or security in that sense. And I think we could have tried. And I totally like give people credit who also try. I give credit to everybody out there just facing what we face. There's no lack of bravery in anything anyone does. But at the same time, for us, it just was no longer sustainable to like keep our spirits with us. It felt like, and to do what we were doing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there's definitely like moments, for example, in my life, I just want to throw my hands up and just be like, enough is enough.
Right?
Like, this is so exhausting.
Like, I'm tired.
Yes.
I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that.
Definitely. So you guys decide to like get into this trailer and drive. Where did you guys decide to go, and what was the plan for the next year?
So the really fun part about it is we did not foresee COVID. So we bought the trailer in December of 2019. We bought a really old one. We were not like, and again, anyone who's doing anything, like, full kudos. Like I'm cheering for you all. But like we were not the camp that was like, we have 100 grand to spend and buy a new van and like do this build out. And like, no, that like wasn't our situation. We had a limited amount of funds and it was like, we got to be smart. And so we bought this older trailer for like $5,000. And we spent maybe 2 grand renovating it and making it off grid, like putting solar panels on it and all that kind of thing. It took us maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And then we were going to set out. And then COVID hit. And so it did prolong. Bless my brother and his wife for keeping us longer than they thought they would. But we eventually were like, we got to go. And so we left in May of 2020. And we decided we'll go to Colorado. We're residents there. And we decided it was safe because we're like, we're going to be in the wild. This is off grid. And so we drove from Oklahoma straight to Colorado in one day. And from then on, we only camped throughout wild spaces in Colorado, just totally off the grid. And we did that for several months. We were in all kinds of places in Colorado that we had never been able to get to that were a little more wild. And then we thought, okay, like let's go through the rest of the country. And so we ended up circling through like Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, going north up to Washington and Oregon and circling back down. And so it was mostly the Western United States, Northwestern.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you guys also did your like sort of traveling in the sense, but you were only exploring the wilderness basically in that time.
100%. I think we paid for one campsite in the entire time, mostly on necessity of like finances. So all of it was wild camping, like national forests or Bureau of Land Management, just places you can camp for free that are really just all alone. And most of those places did not have phone service, which was really interesting during a pandemic because I like have these memories of being like camped out near like a river or something and nobody's out there, nothing. And I mean, the world feels crazy, but we just like had absolutely no idea what was going on. We had bought like a handful of books and, like had some downloaded music. And for 4 or 5 days at a time, it was like anything could be happening. We have no idea. But it felt a little scary at first. It's an uncommon feeling to be in the wild and have no connection with the world or what's going on or your family or your friends. It's definitely like there's a feeling at first that you realize like it really hits you and you're just like, oh my gosh, like we're alone. And it is like this sort of like, ah. But then I remember the first week I felt really vulnerable. We were camped by this like lone mountain and we tried to climb it one day and there was no service and it felt really vulnerable. But I remember the second week when we were somewhere else, like there was this like weird sinking feeling that was just like, you get to create the world you want, like being separate from it. And we do have this amazing chance, like with our like lack of financial obligation and everything. There's no job, there's no house, there's nothing. You sold all your stuff, there's no debt. And it did hit me this moment. It was just like you're free. There's no one to answer to. There's no one to say, oh, sorry, I'm late to like this meeting. Like there's nothing. There's like you waking up whatever time you want. There's a sound of a river. There's a book and a cup of coffee. There's the way your feet feel on the ground. There's you smiling at this person that has gone on this crazy journey with you. And you're poor and you feel it and you know it. You're living in a trailer, for God's sake. But like there was something else. It was just you're free. And like I love that feeling, but it's gonna fuck with me for the rest of my life. And the way that I have to like integrate back into society now.
No, I totally get that.
Yeah.
It's just one of those, it's like once you've experienced absolute bliss, why would you want to change that? But then at the same time, it's like knowing and recognizing that at some point you have to, but do you have to?
Ugh, that's the question. That's the question, because it's just like, man, we met so many like cool people on the road, so many friends, so many reasons people were on the road, a lot of similar reasons, a lot of people just like kind of fed up, needing a minute and looking for freedom in a sense. America likes to talk about being free, but I'll say something controversial. We are not.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned that you met some other people. Did you actually meet people in the wild at any point, like other couples or friends or something that were just like individuals trying to do the same thing? And what was it like bonding with them? Like the conversations must have been totally different and the connecting must have been so much deeper.
Yes, we met great friends in our like normal day life, but the friends you meet out there, anyone you meet instantly, it's a bond because immediately these people are living like this. They've given up everything. And generally people living like that, they've thought about it. They've like thought about what their life means to them. And immediately there's no small talk. And that's what I loved about it. I get really exhausted by small talk, which is okay because it's the way we initiate ourselves with other people. But out there, it just doesn't exist. You would find an area and you would like kind of pull up and you would camp, and you could see other people like just kind of sitting out in the evening, you know, like with a beer or whatever, just hanging out. And like you just kind of like wander over, or people wander over to you. It's a really common thing. And you're just, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing out here? You know, that's like how it
Yeah.
starts. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, this. And
Yeah.
we just honestly like met some of like the best friends of our life out there, people that like we just bonded with. And every single night, I feel like everyone just has such an awareness of like, of boundaries and of health, of like whatever you need in a really different way than we encountered in like the normal world. But like it was so fun because at night we'd be like, okay, let's all meet back at this spot at like 7:30 and we'll all bring food. You know, that's a sharing is big because you all know each other is scraping with what they can. And so everyone just brings what they can and you just like make a party out of anything. And that was really fun and really unique, and living around fires and oh yeah, I miss that, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like from the conversations that you had with the others there, were a lot of them or most of them there because they'd hit some kind of level of a rock bottom in their own lives and felt like they needed to get away? Or were some there just for the adventure?
I feel like most people we met personally had hit like a kind of like a rock bottom of like a, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm so tired of working this hard and earning this little, and I don't get to spend it's time. Like I don't get to spend time thinking about like who I am and what I want, or being with like other people or my partner. The money I think we have to earn to like live really robs us of our time. And I think it was a lot of people that had that same sentiment, that was like, I just want some time back. And it's a great way to do it because it just was a cheaper way of existence. So by nature, you just didn't need to come up with as much energy that is money to be able to sustain yourself. And so you had, as a byproduct, more time.
So, can you walk me through like a typical day out in the woods? What was, yeah, what was it like?
Okay, so you stink all the time. You just like totally stink. And you don't, here's the thing is, you don't know you stink.
Right.
No, like we were like those people you like wash it. Like I like try to be really conscious of it, but you walk in a grocery store and like you don't realize you're becoming like those people, you know, you just don't because you're like, anyway. So
interesting.
number one, you stink. Number two, you don't care.
Yeah.
Number three, you don't know.
True.
But after that, like a typical day though, like we didn't have an alarm clock or whatever. So you just kind of wake up and, you know, my husband and I, we had this thing called rounds and grounds.
Rounds and grounds.
Grounds and grounds that we would do every day. And it meant we just like to take our shoes off and like feel like the feet with, you know, to the earth, and then drink coffee outside and just talk, like watch the sun come up, like laugh about the weird thing we saw the day before, or say, I read this weird thing in the book last night. I don't know, like it was so nice just to sit there and like have coffee outside with your shoes off. I've never realized what a luxury these tiny things in life are. It will haunt me forever.
Yeah.
But like I was like, oh, this is great. And then after that, my husband likes to mountain bike, so I might drop him off down this dirt road at a trail, and I'd say, I'll see you later. And I would usually find a river, and I had two bins, and I really like to wash our clothes in the river or bathe or whatever. We didn't use public facilities for that. We just chose personally not to, just because I thought it was fun, to be honest. And it felt great. So I don't know. I had a clothing line, and I would stretch it out and wash my clothes in the river. I like to listen to podcasts if I had downloaded them. Yeah. And then, just like set the clothes out, like wait for them. We, you know, would have dinner, like making that later, like a beer or something. And we also really like to hike a lot. We spent a lot of the places we went we tried to camp in looking for really cool hiking spots to go to all over the US. And that was one of our favorite things to do. And we felt like we were avid hikers in Colorado, but we definitely ran into some interesting situations hiking in other places in the US.
That's so cool. And it's like such a simple thing, but yet when you slow down your pace of being, that can take a whole day. It just depends on how I feel like over here, you're trying to do everything so quick so you can get as much done in a day that, yeah, a lot gets done, but there is no appreciation for any of those little things.
I think it was that thing I was talking to you about earlier that it takes on a weird meditative sort of art, these really things that you take for granted every day, like bathing or like washing clothes or finding food or water. I think people think of road life as like a vacation, but like truly all of those things take a lot of time and energy to like plot and plan. And but then like when you do them, like you just feel so with them. Like you said, like you're not in a rush to like get those things done so that you can log back onto work or something like that. You're just like, oh, like this is the way like the river looks at this time of the evening when I dip my bucket in, and the way the water reflects on it to like wash my clothes. It takes on something really different. And life becomes very like romantic with the mundane.
Yeah, definitely. Did you ever allow like just the skies tell you the time of the day? Or were you still sort of
Yes. We problematically did not know what day it was a lot, even what month or
crazy?
what time, because it just started to become so like it wasn't important anymore. There was no schedule. And like you do weirdly enter this sort of like timeless state. It's so weird. Like if I feel like I would hear someone talking about it, I'd be like, you gotta be kidding me. But like I don't know, like we had no reason to know. There was nothing we had to be anywhere for. And so you just sort of are. And how strange that was. But then I don't know, at the same time, how natural that felt by the end of it. Now being back like in the world, at like a job and stuff, I feel ashamed to say I like have not recovered because I'm just like, oh, this time.
Yeah, exactly. This concept of time.
Yeah, it's always like, oh, you gotta like get to this on time and do these things before that thing. And like, I don't know, out there it was different. It was nice. Yeah.
You mentioned before that, like searching for food. Can you tell me about a little bit about that? So you were not actually going to the store and buying stuff.
Well, we did. We did totally go to the store and like buy stuff. We also got into like low key foraging. We bought like this little book because we didn't have phone service of like how to identify plants. And so that became a really interesting part of our life out there that I found really fun. There was like days of just sort of walking through woods and sort of looking at plants and identifying and like what you can use, what you can eat, and its medicinal use even. And I really didn't know a lot of that before. And I think like a lot of people might think of like these types of situations and be like, ah, you're just like a type of person. I'm just like, I didn't know any of this. Like it was sort of born in stages out of first necessity, but then through like it just became something that sounded fun. And so, yes, like we did go buy like food at grocery stores, but we also started to identify plants like around where we lived and learn more about their incorporations. And that kind of was a blast.
That's so cool. So, like, actually, like pulling out the different plants and berries and fruits and stuff that you see sort of growing in nature and actually figuring out ways to like use it, cook it. I guess you are also keeping your meals fairly simple, not like filled with sauces and spices.
Yeah. They were pretty simple for sure. It was like I say, like, I don't know, every night sort of felt like this like event. There was like this sort of like feeling of like festival in it. I think probably because we weren't so exhausted. I really noticed prior to then that we always love cooking. My husband's a really beautiful chef, and he always loved cooking, and it always made the night something to look forward to. But I did always notice that the energy we had reserved to engage in that with that level of festivity after like our workday, like most people in the world, like you're just limited. But I do feel like there is like this feeling of like revelry, like this sort of like energy that it wasn't all taken from you. And so it was just this like something like electric about it where you're just like, we're alive,
Yeah, definitely.
and like we're eating potatoes,
Yeah.
but they're so good.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's so cool. What about in
Yeah.
terms of like safety if you had to go to the hospital or these kind of things? Like,
Mm, it's a really good question. So there was an area in like Wyoming that we were camping in wild for like a good week. And we did decide to go on this very adventurous hike on this very high peak in Wyoming that was quite remote. And long story short, we did sort of get stranded on said mountain, and I got injured as a snowstorm was coming in. And it was a bit of a debacle getting off this mountain. But I say it very like lightly and nonchalantly, but truly it was actually like one of the scariest moments of my life of like this is where it all goes wrong. Of like you guys were like on this adventure, like it was all good and fun, but like you're somewhere so wild you don't even understand how in the wild you are. And you took your chance, and now you've gotten injured on the top of this mountain and you can't get off, and there's this storm encroaching, and we couldn't find the trail off of this mountain, and all we could find was this like cornice, which is like an overhang of an avalanche section. And we were like, we have to get off, there's no chance. And so it was like this sort of rock climbing event without having like rock climbing gear with us. And I think this was like 2.5 years ago. And to this day, that knee that I injured still hurts really badly. And we didn't have health insurance. And we were kind of out there for the facet of freedom. So even though I hurt my leg on this adventure in Wyoming, we just sat in our trailer for 2 weeks and I let it heal. That's what we did. There was no doctor's visit. Even when I think I got COVID one time, it's just, you just do it differently, especially without health insurance. And that totally was a risk. And yeah, in the United States, you don't have free health insurance and it can be very, very expensive. And I think I just like wasn't willing to sacrifice the funds we had allotted for this like chance to have freedom for like my leg. And to be honest, I think I would make the chance again, even though it's
really?
still, yeah, I would. It still hurts today. But like, I don't think I would make a different decision today just based on the cost that it would have been to go to a hospital and have them look at my, like we would have been done and then in the hole and back where we started where we owe someone something. And I
Yeah.
don't know, it wasn't worth it. Yeah. And I knew it wasn't broken, it wasn't anything crazy like that, but it was definitely something I should have sought medical attention, but we just, long story short, we just didn't. So
Wow. And is that generally like how you approached anything that any injury, anything else that came? There was never a point where you ever tried to, wow.
no, yeah, there was no doctor's visit. The only thing that there was prior to the trip, again in that series of events, is when we found out that I had melanoma skin cancer. We did seek medical intervention for that, and that was sort of the last drop in the bucket that sort of pushed us over the edge. And I did have surgery for that prior to going on the road.
Gosh, just like so many things, one after another, just has to like pile on, right?
Even my best friend was like, this is like unreal. Yeah, because it sounds like I'm almost like characterizing or like I wish I were making it up. I wish I were like embellishing upon a story truly when it all fell apart. Like it was devastating. Like I don't mean to like diminish that part of the story and act like, oh, like all these things happened and it gave me this great chance to like live this life. Like that only happened because I just felt like I had nothing left to be able to like live in life in the same way. Like the night my husband called me and said, like, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but like we've lost one of our cars in the snowstorm. And I was at work waiting for him to pick me up. I just like remember everyone had left the office. I had crawled under my desk and just like sobbed. And I'm not like a big crier. I'm like a big, like, we can do this. But I just was like, I can't believe all these things going wrong, and I'm not sure why. Yeah. So I don't want to diminish, I guess, that part of it in terms of like how hard it was to get to the point to make a decision. Like, I guess I don't want to glamorize it in a way of being like, oh, like though it was beautiful and it was wonderful and we like got to live in the wild and have a minute and have peace and figure out what our time meant to us and maybe who we were. But in like the same token, like we were only out there because the system had failed us and our life had fallen apart. And honestly, we were just devastated. And there was really nothing left. Like it wasn't this like cool thing for us to do. Like it was this sort of like, what else are we going to do? It was born out of, yeah, I remember renovating that thing and even just like crying because I was like, I cannot believe this is our life. We're like, we had this whole life, we had these perfect jobs and like all this, whatever. And I'm at my brother's house, or no, we were at my dead father's house at that point with my brother. I'm renovating a trailer that we now live in and we are homeless. Like that was what it was born in. Yeah. And it was hard, even though the experience became beautiful as we went along. But like, yeah, I guess I just don't want to minimize that.
Yeah, definitely. It's like like a really humbling experience. It's like now I have to understand that I'm no longer average, well-to-do, well-off. I'm not in that strata anymore. I belong to a totally different social category at this point, and I need to come to terms with that. How do I? Because I have always been thinking as an average or well-to-do person, how do I even make that transition mentally? It's really interesting.
We didn't even know to file for unemployment when my husband lost his job because we're just so dumb to that world. And I'm like more embarrassed to say that than proud. But we were just like, I don't know. We just like did not understand because of like our former life of like, how do you behave now? It felt like we were strangers to like both sides of our life. We were strangers to the side that was like, oh, like everything works out for you, and we were strangers to the side that says like nothing works out for you. And like now, I don't know, it's like this weird sort of like purgatory of just like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a way, it's like we always look for belonging. And when we don't belong, we get a bit confused. But in a sense, not belonging is freeing in a way as well. It's just how you choose to like listen to that, right? Like, and how you choose to pay attention to it. But when you have found that sense of like, okay, I'm just going to roll with it. I'm going to roll with not belonging. I'm going to purposely not belong now. It can be really, really freeing in a way. And I love that you guys, chose to do that,
And I think that's where like the living on the road and us deciding, we would like a break. We would like to be a part of nature. We would like to own less. We would like to maybe not have service.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, read books.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's when it's like, and hike. Like, yeah. I think that was the thing that came out of that moment.
Yeah. Did you come across like really cool, interesting wild animals or scary wild animals?
Yeah, totally.
Tell me about this.
Yeah. There was like one area we were hiking and we were like feeling really cool. We were like off trail. We heard something in the bushes and we thought, oh, like, what is it? We were kind of excited. We always like little animals, like a deer. No, it was a baby grizzly.
Oh no.
And so what you know about baby grizzlies is the mama grizzly is like really
Always
close behind.
lingering around. Yeah.
So yeah, it became this thing of, and it would kind of follow us, as we were walking. It was like interested. And so we were like, no, 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 no. And so we had to be on bear alert, and we had like our little bear spray with our packs and just sort of walk us slowly. But it was in an area that we weren't used to being in, because Colorado doesn't have grizzlies, and we were more in the north. And so, yeah, we were definitely on guard. And yeah, we saw moose. There are definitely moose in areas that we saw, and you have to be really careful with those animals too. But to be honest, we were usually pretty excited, aside from that grizzly bear scenario, when we got to see animals. I don't know. It makes us feel like wild. And so it's fun.
Did you ever try to hunt one? And like,
honestly, it would have been really cool if we probably would have had the gear to do something like that. But no, we didn't really hunt anything out there. Yeah, we were just still straight off our corporate streak.
Yeah.
We weren't that cool. We weren't that cool yet. We weren't that rugged. We were just we were playing around.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
that would be like some kind of next level, going back in time sort of situation.
I do love those primitive things though. It is such a fascinating way to live. But I don't know. I feel like we got our fill of using compasses and maps and things you have to use when you don't have phone service.
Yeah.
And that was interesting.
Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about reintegrating back in. What triggered you both to decide to come back into this world, and how did you reintegrate?
So again, it's going to sound like a story I'm making up, but it was sort of a not by choice thing. We had come back, we had circled through the whole US, and we were like, oh, we'll hang out in the area of Colorado, and we'll go camp out in Arizona for the winter. But this one day we had decided to leave our camper on this mountain and go up this random trail up a faraway country mountain. And because we wanted to find this really remote trail that we heard was great to go hike on. And so we're going up this very remote mountain that we had not seen any cars on. And we're 15 miles in, and we hit this ice patch on the side of this cliff. And we immediately are because we lost a car before, in a snowstorm. And we're we should not go any farther. And so we start to back up. We think we're fine, but before we know it, my husband and I in our truck, it slips and we tumble off the side of this cliff. And there's trees on the side. And so we roll, and then the trees catch us after the first roll. And so I actually went unconscious. And then my husband, he was okay. He was definitely a little bit bloody, but I eventually he I don't know, woke me up or whatever. And I think it was the seatbelt, the way I was hanging, that had cut off the oxygen. And so he got me unsituated from that. And we're on this mountain, and we're just oh my God, it just happened that. And the car is kind of, precarious. And so we're just we need to get out of this car, and we need to grab a little bit of supplies because we're 15 miles up a mountain. And so, yeah, we grab a backpack with water and some food, and we crawl out a side window, and we realize it's getting dark. We have 15 miles. It's cold. It's November. So I don't know, he's bleeding. I'm a little out of it. And we just we just have to move. We can't stay here. And so we start hiking down this mountain, and I think we get about 5 or 6 miles, and there's this random hunter with his son. Again, it's a very remote area. There's nobody out there. And we flag him down, and it was so funny because he was so reluctant to stop. I don't know if it's hunting season. I don't know what it was, but we were my husband's bleeding. We're just we need help, And there was no service in the town this day that we were in for whatever reason, which was random. But we were we need you to, can you please take us to town? And he really thought about it. We offered to pay him. We were just it did get to like this begging point because we knew like if we're out here all night, I don't, I don't know. We don't have anything but this like backpack or whatever. It's like 30 degrees. So anyway, we convinced this guy and he takes us into town and we make some calls. And yeah, I think that's a moment. And like you kind of have like many moments of that on the road where you just like kind of realize how like helpless you are. You just like kind of realize the situation you're in of just like, you don't have a home. You're in the middle of nowhere. You don't have service. Like there are those moments that you're just like, whoa. And that moment was like a big one. And yeah, like we still were like far away from any family or friends. And so we ended up like hitchhiking from that town all the way back to the mountain that we had camped on. And that's sort of like what we did for like about like, I think 2 or 3 days, just sort of like hitchhike to get to and from. This is a long story short, but that's what took us off the road, is because that vehicle was obviously like totally totaled. It was gone. We just had our camper. That is what effectively ended the journey for us. Is yeah, we actually would have probably really liked to be out there much longer, but yeah, we lost that vehicle, so we had to go a different route.
Like
Yeah.
a series of like unfortunate events. I mean, I suppose like living out in nature, there is going to be again that possibility, right, of like some kind of incident happening, but that's a lot to
Yeah,
take.
it did feel like we definitely ran into people and they did have like mishaps, people break down, like things happen out there. It's definitely not uncommon. But yeah, it did feel just like very abrupt.
Yeah. Like you weren't really ready for it in the sense, right?
No, yeah, we were still having a good time. But I don't know, we did have some like really, really good friends in Colorado, and like that was like a couple hours away, that eventually were able to come and get us and hook up our trailer and bring it back to their home. And we had Thanksgiving with them, and which was really sweet and lovely. But eventually we sort of had to like regroup. And that's what sort of forced us to decide more money based of like, we need to get jobs and do the thing. And so now we're effectively back in Colorado.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you basically started from the ground up again. So finding jobs to then, finding an apartment to rent that worked for the both of you financially and.
Yeah, totally. I think the integration, it's been difficult, to be blunt, but in a weird way, you kind of, I can't decide if it's a good thing or problematic, but you like have your wits about you because you just kind of know yourself better. You have so much time to reflect in nature. You have so much time to think about all the things in life that like you were just like, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have like apologized to that boss, or like I should have spoken up for myself, or like I should have thought more of my worth, and these like you just have so much time to think about all these things. Like you just have your memories, when you don't have your technology, and you're much more integrated with them. And so you come back sort of like with that, the truth that you've sort of gleaned from that time. And yeah, I feel like I've had a difficult relationship with American capitalism most of my life. But I will say in integrating, it was just like I just felt very clear about this is what I will accept and this is what I won't. And now I know I will become like hashtag, like we called it homeless with a twist
Yeah.
again, because I will not sacrifice these things again that are integral to me, because that is a bigger cost to me than a house or a car. Like, I don't know, like I just saw the cost of it. And so weirdly, the job that I got when we came back was like the healthiest relationship I've had with work in a long time. Yeah, just because the boundaries were so much better. But like it's still difficult, because you just kind of I still miss like the cadence of that life. But it's not realistic. Like we just had enough money for a year to sort of like take a break. And even that, like I feel so lucky, I guess. Like people don't have that. People don't have like, especially with kids and, all this, like, you don't have a year to just like say like, fuck it, especially not now with how the economy has gone. But yeah, like you just, it's not realistic to like feel like, okay, well, this is how life is now. You kind of like the hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell. You sort of go on this journey of exploration and of like, meeting your demons and like all the things. But then eventually you kind of have to reintegrate and sort of take everything you've learned and take it back to the place like where it all started. And it is difficult for sure.
Yeah. Now that you have sort of gone through this, though, there must be like a part of you that feels empowered to be like, firstly, yeah, like drawing that boundary. And it's easier to draw the boundary because what is the absolute worst that's going to happen? I'm going to get fired. Okay. You know what? I can deal with that. I've lived away from all of this before anyway. But also on the other side, it's this empowerment of knowing I've done it before and I can do it again. So it doesn't have to be the last of it. And maybe this time around, I can do it by choice, not by force. And, I can plan around it maybe differently in the areas that we didn't do before. So, learning from the past mistakes as well. I mean, like, okay, how can we prepare ourselves better? And that kind of stuff.
It's like you're in my head, Jenica. You're totally in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's like exactly. It's like you've done this before. I don't know what you signed up for, but yeah, it's been exactly like you stated. It's been of just like, I don't know, how do we avoid debt on every level? Every level, because it makes you liable to like your employer. It makes you not being able to say no.
Yeah.
Like it just, yeah, it's like the same situation, but you're like totally doing it differently. You're just like, no. I think we've also like given each other breaks. Like, my husband, I was just like, we got this great opportunity for him to like pursue like other like lines of like passion work. And so I think we're definitely like more about like, hey, if we have enough for now, like we can pay down our debts, like we need to be seeking like passion work. And so, yes, there's that. I think there's a different sort of like thinking about life, 100% with like work and stuff. I totally started a job at one point and attempted to quit after the first week because they were like, you will be working nights and weekends. And I was like, I don't think so. I was like, I can live in a trailer down by the river and be pretty fucking happy about it.
Yeah, true.
You can keep it. But anyway, you're right. Like you definitely feel like a sense of like of courage, of sovereignty is a perfect word, of your life in a different way. It weirdly has tributaries of either becoming problematic or empowering.
Yeah.
I think that is the real trick in tying those together in today's society. But I don't know, my husband and I have a dream now from that experience of like, we want to buy land, and it's now the new dream. That's like, because we want a home. We want a place to be. It's not sustainable to just like, for us. Some people can do it, kudos, to like live on the road for the rest of your life. But we would love a home, a place that's our own, that when something bad happens, you have a place you belong. That's like a very integral need to a human. And so, yeah, we're working towards that in a different way, but we'd love land, we'd love nature, we'd love that sort of sense of freedom. And it's kind of given us something new to work towards.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, like sort of like just merging the two sort of like ways of being together, right? Yeah.
1,000%. Yeah.
So I'm going to end this interview with one last question. For a person who is a city person, a person who spent so much time in their life just like living this kind of rat race, quick paced, hitting those milestone type of lifestyle, would you recommend this?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally would actually. I like, obviously my husband and I, like, this comes with conditions, I'll be honest. I think it could be a miserable experience, but what I believe is even that miserable experience could be transformative. I think there's still something to glean from that sense. But yeah, I just feel like in this day and age, it's really hard to gain a sense of ourselves and what we want and who we are. It's so busy. And so, yeah, I think that anybody can do something like this. My husband and I knew nothing about living on the road, about installing solar, or how to live in a wild campsite. We knew, like, we lived in Colorado and we knew enough to like camp, but like, to be honest, like, it is something for anybody who really has the itch and just or needs a break. It's hard. I'm not going to lie. There are like things out there that you're like, wow, this is a different situation that I'm in out here. But I don't know. I think if somebody, I think it's down to the will. Like, if you wanted it, if you like want that sort of like freedom and that sense of autonomy, and then yes, I think it's right for you. I think if it is like more of a like a hobbyist sort of thing, like it, or like, I think the people I see struggle the most, honestly, is like you see it on like YouTube and stuff. I think that's like, I don't even think it's wrong for you. Like, who am I to say? You know, it could be great, even if that's why you came to it. I don't know. But like, I would say like, there's definitely grit to be had in it, but it's such a great experience, whether or not you come out of it being like, I love it or I hate it.
Yeah, I like that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's something that is in your will, then I'm like, go do it. Like, it's just like you get one life.
Yeah, true.
Like, why not?
Yeah.
There's something like, it's ineffable though. I don't know that we've like reached a point in society to like where we can quite describe what it is about when you feel the way you do in your life, and you maybe go walk through a forest and you just like feel the way your feet feel like on a forest floor, and you smell that smell, and the trees just kind of have that light like wave to them. Like, there is some sort of like, I can't describe it, like exchange happening, and like you always walk out of those woods feeling lighter, feeling like understood and seen in this way. I do. But I do feel like my connection in this world that I'm in is nature, and I know that everyone has something different. So I guess maybe it's just a matter of everyone finding what's right for them. But I just personally think if you don't know where to start, nature is a really good one.
I love that. Thank you so much, Meg, for being here with us today and just, sharing your story with me.
Thank you so much, Jenica. It's been such a pleasure. Like, I love your questions. I love your insight. I just feel like you've lived a million lives.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Joe Mills,
Chris Trzynski, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.